Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. With the highly anticipated release of Wuthering Waves version 2.0, we finally got our first real 5-star Glacio DPS character, Carlotta. And she happens to be also our first 5-star pistol user as well. In today's ultimate guide video, you'll learn everything you need to know about Carlotta.
Glory demands more. In the name of the Montellis. Victory favors me.
Quick note, this video was filmed on the media server and things may be subject to change upon the official release. Please check the comments below to see if anything changed. It feels weird to say, but Carlotta is an incredible 5-star Glacio DPS. Incredible 5-star Glacio DPS being a complete oxymoron, given the alternative prior to Carlotta. But here she is, and boy is she fantastic. As usual, we'll go through her kit and rotation, her echoes and stats, weapons, sequences, teams, showcases, and of course, my opinion on Carlotta at the end of the video.
Found your weak spot.
Shooting on over to her kit, Carlotta's revolvers revolve around spending moldable crystals to fill up her forte and to use her forte before using her immaculately animated Resonance Liberation. Carlotta's basic attacks generate moldable crystals, and alternatively spends moldable crystals if you have them. E2 generates 3 moldable crystals, and the following enhanced 3 basic attacks spend 1 moldable crystal each. In total, Carlotta can hold up to 6 moldable crystals. Generally speaking though, you don't really need to rely on her basic attacks much in a full team rotation, but they are nice for less scripted fights. Also, her aerial plunge attack has a follow-up attack where she generates 3 moldable crystals, and she has this heavy attack while when your forte is not full, she'll generate 3 moldable crystals as well. Her resonance skill is a 2-parter and does this cool flip. Get it? Cool because the enemy is frozen, so it's cool. Anyway, the first part of her skill generates 3 crystals, and the second part of the skill spends all of her crystals to efficiently fill up her forte bar. So all this talk about crystals leads us to her forte. Spending a moldable crystal generates 10 substance, which is her forte energy thing, and Carlotta needs 120 substance to use her forte. Her forte is executed by simply pressing and holding the basic attack button, and it deals a solid amount of damage and reduces her skill's cooldown by 6 seconds. Her forte also counts as skill damage, and it actually has a 22-second cooldown. And very importantly, using her forte increases the next Resonance Liberation's damage by 80%. Up next is the hardest hitting part of her kit, her Resonance Liberation.
Glory demands more.
She does an initial blast and can fire 4 death knells and then the finale shot. Just make sure to unload everything within 10 seconds as it's a use it or lose it type of situation. You can also reposition a bit by holding a direction during her 4 death knells. Very importantly, her liberation removes any forte she might have and freezes all of her forte generation. This means that you'll want to use her forte before using her liberation. Her liberation also counts as skill damage, and you can even swap during it without losing the additional shots. Next up we have her intro skill, which most notably generates a quarter of her forte and 3 crystals. And then we have her outro skill, which simply does a bit of damage. You might have noticed a reticle appearing on the enemy. Well, this reticle comes from her second major trace, and it's called Deconstruction. Deconstruction is applied by these abilities. Hitting an enemy with Deconstruction ignores 18% of their defense. Now, you don't really need to play around this mechanic since it just happens naturally, but it's good to know why the enemy has a reticle on them and why you should unlock her second major trace. One last notable detail is that some of her attacks, like her basic one, can parry the enemy. It'll be quite fun to see what some of you Gigabrain gamers end up parrying. Now, all of this yapping leads us to this universal cookie cutter rotation. First, start off the fight by using Carlotta's skill before doing your support stuff. Then do all of your support stuff, and after that, intro Carlotta onto the field. Assuming your supports took a long enough time, her skill will be off cooldown, so you can use her skill, plunge, and forte. Then use her liberation, death knell 4 times, finale shot, skill, echo outro, and repeat. Of course, there are plenty of ways to get similar results, and you'll learn more complex applications of her kit and rotations as you use her more, but hopefully this is a reasonable starting point for you to start mastering the way of the revolver. As for talent priority, focus on her liberation, then her skill and forte. After that, level her normals, and lastly her intro skill.
me.
Fortunately for Carlotta's echoes, which set you should use is incredibly simple. Use the new Frosty Resolve set with the new Sentry construct. The new Frosty Resolve set is tailor-made for Carlotta, as it provides Glacio and Resonance skill damage, as she'll stack it up to 2 stacks by the first Death Knell of her Liberation. The Sentry Construct Echo actually just provides you 12% Glacio damage and 12% Resonance skill damage by simply having it equipped. So yeah, this new set is pretty uncontestedly the best option for Carlotta. Now you can use the 5-piece Lingering Tunes or the 5-piece Freezing Frost while you're farming for the new Frosty Resolve set, but they fall far behind at around 86 and 78.5% respectively of the new Frosty Resolve set. For main stats, the 4-cost Echo is generally crit rate, especially with her signature weapon, but crit damage can be considered for weapons like the Static Mist. Also, generally you'll want to use Glacio plus Glacio 3-cost Echoes, but using 1 attack percent 3-cost Echo is as always fine as well. Carlotta scales off of attack percent, so the 1-cost Echoes should also be attack percent. For substats, it's the usual double crit, attack percent, resonance skill damage, and energy regen. Now as for the energy regen stat, I found this to be a bit of an issue. With Zhezhi and Shorekeeper, her energy regen requirements felt a lot lower, at around 115% to consistently get her liberation. This is because both Zhezhi and Shorekeeper spend a lot of time on field and generate a decent amount of energy. However, when I was using her with like Tauchi plus Verena, by the 3rd rotation she wasn't able to get her liberation back up even with 134% energy regen. I'll talk a bit more about this in the showcase section, but depending on your team, you could need as little as 115% to as much as over 130% energy regen to consistently use her liberation based on her teammates. Perhaps you guys will have a different experience than I did with energy regen for Carlotta, so please take this with a small grain of salt. Also, energy regen is always a moving target depending on the fight, so yeah.
Found your weak spot.
As for weapons, well, unsurprisingly, Carlotta's best option is her signature pistol, The Last Dance. This thing boosts her resonance skill damage by a massive 48%, which obviously she greatly appreciates. The Static Mist is actually a reasonable close second place at around 86% of her signature weapon. Its energy regen stat actually helps out, although you may find your crit ratio a bit lopsided with the Static Mist. Interestingly, most of the 4-star pistols seem to perform similarly to each other, ranging from 74 to 78% of her signature pistol, so if you're a free-to-play player, go for whichever of these you might have the highest refinement for. Speaking of these 4-star pistols, I wasn't able to properly test the Thunderbolt because it's not on the media server and you may need to adjust your rotation for it, but even assuming 100% uptime, it's surprisingly about as good as the other 4-star options. Undying Flame is a decent option as it just gives resonance skill damage, and Carlotta can generally finish her rotation in time for it. And finally, the new craftable pistol, Romance in Farewell, should theoretically be at max stacks pretty quickly, since she applies deconstruction to the enemy, which is a debuff, but this weapon also isn't on the media server, so I couldn't confirm this 100%. If any of our assumptions are inaccurate on release, please check the comments down below, but overall, all the relevant 4-stars seem to be around the same level as each other.
Victory favors me.
Up next, we have Carlotta's fellow British Tea Party enjoyers, her teammates. Carlotta follows the tried and true format of DPS, Damage Amplifier, and Healer. Since Carlotta deals a ton of skill damage, Carlotta will benefit a lot from Skill Damage Amplify. Overall, one of her best teams will be Carlotta, Zhezhi, and Shorekeeper. Of course, needless to say, you can replace Shorekeeper with Verena for faster rotations, and even Baizhi will work in the healer slot. As for Zhezhi's slot, you can substitute her with Tauchi for some skill damage amplify, or for Sanhua for lower field time. Do keep in mind though that if you have 2 low field time characters like Sanhua plus Verena, your Carlotta's skill might not be off cooldown by the time it's her turn again. So ironically, Carlotta actually doesn't mind having a longer field time teammate like Zhezhi or Shorekeeper. Now some of you might ask about Lumi, and Lumi can work, but I'm personally not the biggest fan because Lumi's outro skill only lasts for 10 seconds, and much of Carlotta's liberation tends to hit after 10 seconds.
Found your weak spot.
Finally, let's blitz through her sequences. Carlotta's sequence 1 gives some crit rate and some additional forte, which can improve her rotations in some situations. Her sequence 2 increases the finishing blast of her liberation, although the exact amount increase will need a bit of additional testing. Sequence 3 improves her outro skill and resonance skill significantly. Sequence 4 increases the team skill damage. Sequence 5 increases her forte's damage, and Sequence 6 increases each death knell shot as well as freezing the enemy during them, making it a pretty decent Sequence 6. Overall, by Sequence 6, she'll be doing roughly twice the damage of a Sequence 0, Carlotta. Personally, I would go for her signature weapon before going for her sequences, although if you have these static mist, especially with refinements, her early sequences are a solid choice.
Victory favors me.
Alright, we've got a couple showcases for you guys, starting off with Carlotta with, I guess, her best team overall in my opinion, which is Judge and Shorekeeper, and at the beginning you can see that I froze the Crownless in midair. I just wanted to do that because it just looks really funny to see him frozen, even though it's pretty suboptimal because then you end up really far away from it where even Shorekeeper has to step in. But yeah, it's another point too I want to make is, you know, honestly guys, like you guys don't have to play perfectly. It is totally fine. Even myself as a content creator, I don't play perfectly. And we can see here that I didn't do the jump cancels on Jojo to save some time and yada yada yada. But either way, once you kind of get these rotations down with these characters, you know, Tower of Adversity becomes pretty comfortable, especially when you have the right characters as well as the, you know, reasonable rotations. They don't have to be perfect. They are just fine in terms of being able to handle this, with one of the most important factors for clearing tower being properly built characters as well as the right team. And speaking of which, this Tower of Adversity definitely favors this team because I believe coordinated attacks also increase the damage that your resonators do, along with some Glacio damage reduction or resistance reduction. But yeah, we can see that Carlotta is able to output some really nice big numbers thanks to all the buffs from Judge as well as Shorekeeper, and we just stick to the same rotation over and over, and we can see here that we are able to weave in and out with 78,000 blasts just like that, and with a very nice, how much is this going to do? Let's see, over 200,000, yeah, 263,000 damage finishing shot to very easily 3 Dorito that first Crownless. Now this team is definitely much more, I guess I would describe as free-to-play friendly. What if you don't have Jojo? What if you don't have Shorekeeper? This is honestly the best thing I come up with was Tauchi and Verena, and there are definitely some issues with this team, mainly revolving around, well, Tauchi's unwieldiness, and well, Verena also, you know, having very low field time, but Tauchi having extremely long field time. So we can see me intentionally dodging a couple of times. I'm going to get the dodge counters off and, you know, trying to get Tauchi's outro buff out. But fortunately, Carlotta can, you know, fully utilize the buff that, you know, Tauchi provides with some pretty large blasts here. I believe this is going to do just over 200,000 damage, but a lot less damage than, for example, with Jojo and Shorekeeper. The builds between the two Carlottas are the exact same. Also, this is with you know, her signature weapon at sequence 0. So yeah, there's that to keep in mind in terms of, you know, what level of investment these teams have. We can see here that I'm double introing to Tauchi and trying to get opportunities in order to dodge the Crownless, as well as trying to weave in some of Carlotta's combos here and there. But we can see here that we just stick to the same rotation with Carlotta over and over. Once you kind of get this rotation down, you're going to be much better off. And this time we did a lot less damage because I believe we don't have Arena's Liberation, which provides us coordinated attacks, but again, we froze the Crownless in midair. And this time you can see I'm actually spending a bit more time on field with Carlotta because for some reason the third rotation I would find myself not having enough energy, which is definitely a big issue. You can see here I actually swapped Carlotta back on in order to do a few additional attacks because otherwise I was just always a bit short on the third rotation to get her Resonance Liberation. But this time we can see here I think we're just barely going to get enough energy. Look at that, just perfect amount of energy to get her Liberation up for the third time, and just like that we should be able to take out our Crownless friend here, and admittingly in a bit of a tight clear time here, all things considered, but you know, I'm sure with some finessing and refining you guys will be able to 3 Dorito this quite comfortably.
Found your weak spot.
Carlotta is definitely the premium 5-star Glacio DPS character and feels absolutely fantastic to play. Her ranged combat also allows for some additional safety against certain enemies, as well as just feeling very satisfying to play. It also feels great to finally have a powerful Glacio DPS character, as well as one that works perfectly with Zhe. Overall, if you like what you see here, it's pretty hard to go wrong with Carlotta, especially if you have either Zhe or Shorekeeper, or I guess Tao Chi works fine too. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.